Okay, so today we're diving into a really fascinating book from, wow, over a century ago, Charles Wagner's The Simple Life.
Yeah, published way back in 1897.
Right, 1897, horse-drawn carriages in the streets, that whole era. But what's just striking is how much his insights feel relevant, almost eerily so, to our, let's face it, overwhelmingly complex modern world.
Absolutely. It really resonates.
So our mission today really is to try and cut through the noise, just like Wagner wanted to. We want to pull out those timeless nuggets of wisdom from his pages.
No doubt what the simple life actually means, according to him.
Exactly. What does it really mean? And importantly, why does it matter for our happiness, our character right now? Wagner kicks things off with this incredibly vivid scene. It's almost frantic, actually. It's at the home of the Blanchards.
Yes, the wedding preparations.
The wedding, yes. Her daughter Yvonne is getting married, and it's just pure chaos. You have to imagine this constant stream of visitors with gifts, tradesmen loaded down with packages, endless deliveries.
Sounds stressful just hearing about it.
Totally. Wagner paints this picture of servants just at the end of their endurance. And the couple getting married, they no longer have a life or a fixed abode.
Right, their ways are just a blur.
A complete blur. Dressmakers, jewelers, decorators, caterers, morning till night. And the saddest part, maybe, is that love itself, at this really crucial moment, gets pushed aside.
It's forced to make way for all sorts of conventions and futilities, as he puts it.
Yeah. It's this powerful image of life just completely swallowed up by external demands, no room to breathe or even, think straight.
It is funny, though, isn't it? I mean, even back then, people were running themselves ragged over wedding planning.
Some things never change, huh?
Apparently not. But amidst all that chaos, what really stands out is the grandmother's comment.
Oh, right. That's key.
Yeah, she just quietly observes, "Decidedly, my dears, the world is growing too complex, and it does not make people happier. Quite the contrary."
Such a simple, profound observation.
It really is. And that line, it perfectly sets the stage for Wagner's whole argument, doesn't it?
It really does.
That our modern life,
Yeah.
basically from cradle to grave, feels like navigating this maze of endless complication. A world where, as he says, nothing is simple any longer. He felt people were really suffering the consequences of a life that was just too artificial.
It's incredible how that observation from the 1890s just mirrors our anxieties today, isn't it? That feeling of endless complication.
It really is uncanny.
So if that's the problem, Wagner then tries to unpack how we got here. What's the fundamental mistake we're making?
Right.
He argues that, despite all our progress, all our resources, we've somehow managed to create a life that's more complicated and actually less contented.
The great paradox.
Exactly. He talks about how our material needs have just ballooned alongside our resources. Now, on the surface, things like, regular bathing, clean clothes, good food, educating ourselves, these seem like obvious signs of progress.
Of course. Basic improvements.
But then he throws in this idea of parasitic needs.
Yes. That's a powerful concept. These aren't about actual survival, are they?
Not at all.
There are those endless desires for more luxury, more status symbols, more distractions, the things that, ironically, end up eating our time, our energy, our peace of mind.
Like little vampires on our well-being.
Pretty much. They act like a constant drain. And Wagner points out this striking paradox. He asks, are people today really more contented? Are they less anxious than their ancestors were?
It's a good question.
And he observes, never has the question of food and shelter been sharper or more absorbing than since we are better nourished, better clothed, and better housed than ever.
Wow. So the anxiety increases with the provision.
That's what he suggests. And what's really telling is, he says it's not necessarily the poorest who are constantly worried. It's often those with a little ease, the comfortable, and especially the rich.
Why them specifically?
Because for them, it's the constant regret for what one lacks that poisons their satisfaction. He puts it very bluntly. The more goods a man has, the more he wants.
That is such a powerful line. And it just rings so true today, doesn't it? This endless wanting.
The hedonic treadmill, we might call it now.
Right. The struggle for the superfluous, as he calls it. He says it leads directly to more conflict, more bitterness, a real tangible loss of our moral sense.
Yeah, he connects it to such baseness as have envy, avarice, and thirst for pleasure. Things driven by fighting for more than you need.
He paints this picture where people and even things start being valued only by their selling price.
Yeah.
And where honest poverty risks passing for shame. That's a heavy thought.
It really is. And he warns that material prosperity without an offset, without some kind of inner balance, actually diminishes the capacity for happiness and debases character.
So prosperity itself isn't the problem, but prosperity without that inner foundation.
Exactly. He sees things like education and liberty, which are obviously good things,
Sure.
as just tools. Their real worth depends entirely upon the workman who uses it.
Ah, okay. So just having the tool like education or freedom isn't enough. It's how you use it, what you build with it.
Precisely. Which leads to his critical question.
Yeah.
What's the fundamental error here? Why do we misuse these tools?
And his answer is?
He identifies it as the confusion of the secondary with the essential.
Okay, unpack that a bit. Secondary versus essential.
He argues we get totally loaded down with what he calls external good. Material comfort, education, liberty, all the trappings of civilization. He calls all that the frame of the picture.
The frame.
But in focusing so much on the frame, we forget or neglect or even damage the picture itself.
And the picture is?
The picture is us.
Man.
Man with his most intimate possessions, conscience, character, will. Our inner self.
Got it. So we polish the frame, but ignore the artwork inside.
Beautifully put. He uses a great analogy. A good lamp is a lamp that gives good light. Its value is its core function, illumination, not how fancy or expensive the lamp itself is.
We're prioritizing the casing over the glow.
Exactly. The frame over the true picture of who we are inside. It's a really profound point about just completely misplaced priorities.
So, okay, if this complex life focused on the external, the frame, isn't making us happier, what's the alternative? Is Wagner saying we should all just, run off to a cabin in the woods and give up everything?
Right. That's the common misconception, isn't it? But no, he's very clear. Simplicity isn't about outward appearances. It's not about plain dress, a modest dwelling, slender means, or some kind of forced asceticism.
So it's not about poverty chic or anything like that?
Not at all. He even points out, look, someone without shoes isn't necessarily less complex inside. And someone wealthy, riding in a carriage, could actually be profoundly simple and unaffected by their wealth.
Interesting. So it's decoupled from material circumstances.
Completely. Wagner defines simplicity, crucially, as a state of mind.
A state of mind.
Yeah, he says it dwells in the main intention of our lives. A person is simple when his chief care is the wish to be what he ought to be.
What he ought to be.
That is honestly and naturally human. He uses this wonderful analogy. Just let things be what they are. Let a flower be a flower, a swallow, a rock, a rock.
And let a man be a man.
And not a fox, a hare, a hog, or a bird of prey. It's about authenticity. Shedding the pretenses, the roles we play, and just being genuinely human.
That sounds, well, it sounds profound, but also like a huge undertaking, almost spiritual. It's not something you just stumble into, is it?
Definitely not. Wagner really emphasizes this. The spirit of simplicity is not an inherited gift, but the result of a laborious conquest.
A laborious conquest. So it takes work, effort.
A lot of effort. It's about consciously recognizing and working out your mission in life, your true purpose, rather than just getting swept away by ego or needing external validation or chasing fleeting pleasures.
It's an ongoing process, though.
Absolutely. A continuous journey of self-discovery and aligning yourself. He says when you manage to align your opinions and habits with this inner law, this true self,
Then what happens?
then the essential commands the secondary. Order emerges naturally from that simplicity.
Ah, the essential takes charge.
Right. He uses that military analogy. An army is strong when all its energy is focused on a single end, not when the corporal commands the general.
I like that. If the small external stuff is running your life, you're in chaos.
Exactly. You need to let your true purpose, the general, be in command.
Okay, so if simplicity is this inner state, this alignment, how does it actually show up? How does it change things day to day? Wagner gets practical here, right?
He does. He doesn't just leave it as an abstract idea. He dives into several key areas where this simple spirit can really transform our lives.
Where should we start? Maybe with thought and speech. That feels very relevant.
Good place to start. He critiques what he calls the anarchy in human thought. He reminds us that thought is a tool with its own proper function. It isn't a toy.
Not just for idle amusement or endless scrolling, which feels, incredibly prescient for our digital age.
Doesn't it just? And he also slams the degradation of human speech even back in his time.
Another thing that feels painfully current.
Totally. He talks about all the craft, the diplomacy, the subtle legerdemain that makes it so hard to even know the truth about their own age.
Like wading through spin.
Exactly. And he asks, For every newspaper that fosters good feeling, how many spread defamation and distrust? Imagine what he'd say about the internet.
Oh, boy, yeah.
And this, he argues, leads to this deep loss of confidence, of trust in public discourse in each other.
So what's his advice?
To counter all this noise and manipulation, he famously advises us to cultivate silence.
Cultivate silence. Interesting.
Yeah, because, he says, all that we can save in noise, we gain in power. It's about being intentional with our words, our attention, instead of just reacting constantly, finding that quiet space to think clearly.
That idea of saving noise to gain power, that's really compelling, especially now when we're just bombarded constantly. Okay, what about our needs and pleasures? How does simplicity fit in there?
Well, connecting back to our inner life, Wagner notes that what truly sustains us as humans isn't just stuff. It's things like confidence, hope, and goodness.
The intangible provisions.
Exactly. Those are the fundamental provisions. And when it comes to actual needs and pleasures, he points out the sheer absurdity of people, even then, committing suicide because their income fell below some artificial minimum standard for living.
Oh, wow. Chasing an arbitrary benchmark.
Right. It speaks to that endless chase. He warns that man's appetite is not appeased by food. It increases with eating. It leads down this downward way of desire.
The more you feed it, the hungrier it gets.
Precisely. So true pleasure, he asserts, is not in things. It is in us.
Inside us. How so?
He says it's fostered by inner qualities, confidence, moderation, and normal habits. He contrasts the pure, unself-conscious joy of a regular audience at a play with the jaded, disdainful glance of the sad skeptic sitting in a fancy box who can't actually experience real pleasure anymore because their ingenuousness is disappearing.
They've become too cynical, too detached.
Exactly. It's about rediscovering the capacity for simple joys, for genuine wonder, rather than constantly needing bigger, more extreme thrills that ultimately leave you empty.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, and then there's duty. And what Wagner calls the uncelebrated good. This feels like a shift, focusing less on ourselves and more on our contribution. What stands out to you here?
This is really powerful, I think. Wagner calls us to focus on simple duties and elementary justice, just the basics of being decent and responsible.
Simple duties, not necessarily grand world-changing missions.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
He critiques the tendency we have, maybe even more so today, to feel paralyzed by the sheer scale of global problems.
Right, feeling overwhelmed and doing nothing.
Yeah. He urges us instead to just do what you could in our immediate sphere, like actually build relationships with people who are struggling, the disinherited, rather than just acknowledging intellectually that poverty exists.
So less abstract concern, more direct action, even on a small scale.
Exactly. He emphasizes that fidelity in small things is at the base of every great achievement.
That's a grounding thought. The small things add up.
They really do. It's a reminder that real impact often isn't about splashy gestures. It's built on that quiet, consistent discipline of doing the simple duties well, day in, day out, even when nobody's watching. That's what builds character and makes a real contribution.
And what about this inglorious good?
That's a beautiful concept. These are the invisible forces, he says, the hidden virtues that hold everything together. He gives examples like a stonebreaker he watched for 30 years in Alsace, just humming while he works steadily.
Wow, 30 years.
Or the old maids, as he calls them, who quietly and selflessly care for orphans and the poor, often completely unacknowledged, remembered of no one.
The unsung heroes.
Precisely. He stresses that what is best in the world is unknown, and that the treasure of humanity is its hidden goodness. It's all those quiet, unseen acts of kindness and integrity that truly sustain society.
That's a really beautiful and, frankly, profound insight. Makes you reconsider where the real value lies.
It does.
So Wagner suggests that cultivating the simple spirit really starts close to home, right? In the family and through education.
Yes, fundamentally. He paints a pretty bleak picture, actually, of what he saw happening then, the worldly spirit, undermining family traditions, turning the home into just a functional place, a halfway house.
Well, a pit stop.
Yeah, where people just rest a little between two prolonged absences. He worried society was moving toward life in herds, losing that intimate sanctuary.
So what's his solution?
He calls for us to light again the flame put out on our hearts, to make our homes true sanctuaries where children can grow securely and love finds privacy and warmth.
And how does education play into this?
Well, he warns against two really common and problematic approaches to raising kids, approaches we still see everywhere.
Okay, what are they?
First, bringing children up for ourselves. treating them like property, basically, molding them to fit our expectations. This, he says, leads to conformity and eventually a kind of dumb revolt.
Right, suppressing their true selves.
Exactly. The second error is raising them for themselves, turning them into little omnipotent despots, completely self-centered with no moral compass.
The me first generation idea, maybe?
Perhaps. Instead, Wagner advocates educating children for life.
For life, meaning?
Meaning raising them to be active members of humanity, brotherly forces, free servants. It's about fostering respect, honesty, that ingenuousness he values so much, preserving their sense of the marvelous.
That sense of wonder.
Yes, which he sees as the first form of that sense of the infinite. It's about helping them connect to something larger than just material concerns, cultivating character, essentially, not just filling their heads with facts or teaching obedience.
Ultimately, then, Wagner seems to be saying that a lot of the barriers to a better life, a stronger, calmer life, are actually inside us. They're not just external circumstances.
That's a huge part of his message. He particularly singles out pride.
Pride? In what way?
Well, he sees it manifesting in different ways. There's the pride of the great, the powerful or wealthy, which shows contempt, humiliates others, metaphorically splashes mud on them.
Okay, arrogance.
And then there's the pride of the humble, which isolates people. It makes someone like a hedgehog, wounding everyone he touches with their defensiveness or resentment.
Interesting. So pride works both ways.
Yes. He sees pride as the primary force that turns simple social differences, mere ditches, into these vast, impassable gulfs of enmity and misunderstanding. It's fundamentally divisive.
So zooming out, what's the big picture takeaway for Wagner?
He genuinely believes that cultivating the individual man, strengthening our inner core through this practice of simplicity, is the absolute great desideratum of our time, the most needed thing.
Why so essential?
Because he argues that the spirit of simplicity is a great magician. It has this power to soften rough edges, softens asperities, as he says. It bridges chasms, draws together hands and hearts.
It sounds like a force for connection.
Exactly. He calls it the true social cement, the thing that can actually unite people across all those fatal barriers of position, trust, or prejudice that pride creates. He thinks humility should actually increase with power or wealth.
That's counterintuitive for many.
Right. And that true distinction comes from your inner worth, your character, not just outward show. It's really about fostering an inward revolution that then naturally transforms our relationships in society.
Wow. Okay. So bringing it back to us, to you listening, Wagner wrote this over 120 years ago, but his insights feel so potent, it really makes you think. What secondary things, what frames are you still confusing with the essential, the picture in your own life?
Yeah, it's a challenging question. Is there a habit, an object, maybe a pursuit you're clinging to that's actually just complicating things, getting in the way of genuine happiness and a deeper connection with yourself?
Something to definitely mull over.